welcome back. Welcome back to the fun Wednesday night ham radio class on YouTube and with a Zoom classroom. I'm your instructor, Gary, ham radio call sign Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee, and we are moving right along. We're at chapter 7 of 9 chapters in our book. This book, if you take the laptop there, Bruce, the 5th edition of the ham radio license manual for technician class. This is the book that we use. As I mentioned earlier, normally I'd pick up the book and hand it to or show it to you, but my wife is using it to study for her license. Impossible, but okay. So there's a link there. You can go to Amazon if you wanted to check it out. So come back to me just for a second, Bruce, if you would. I asked Ted before we got started, if he had a great weekend or the things that he did, and he had interesting stuff. I had a great weekend for a ham radio operator because, as I mentioned last week, this past weekend was the biggest ham radio contest of them all, the CQ Worldwide Single Sideband Contest. Next month will be the CW contest, but this is my scorecard. I ended up with 950 total QSOs. I spent 25 hours with my BIC. It's a secret factor that contesters always talk about, BIC, butt in chair. The contest was 48 hours long. So I could have spent more time in it, but 25 hours was what I was able to do, and 1,000,000 points. This is the first time I've broken the 1,000,000 point barrier, and your point total comes from the number of stations you work, the number of zones you work, and the number of countries you work. I worked 100 countries on 10 meters. So in a weekend, I got DXCC on 10 meters. That was fun. So propagation is wonderful, was wonderful for the contest. The 10-meter band was wide open with signals all the way from the bottom end of the voice section, 28,300, all the way up to above 29 megahertz. Now, when you get your technician license, and you will, you can be part of this fun because technicians have voice privileges on the 10-meter band from 28,300, that lowest frequency I mentioned, up to 23,500, so 200 kilohertz of bandwidth for technicians. So you could participate in the CQ Worldwide once you have your technician class license and HF radio and antennas. It's a lot of fun, and if you want to see what it was like, check my YouTube channel. Name of the YouTube channel is Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee, or W4EEY, and look for my playlists for the CQ Worldwide contest. And I'm putting up videos every day now. I recorded the entire thing, or most of it anyway. So you can, I'm an old geezer. I go slow. It's not super fast paced, but I get the job done in the end. So anyway, if an old guy like me can do it, you can do it too, probably with a lot more energy. If you got the energy to come out and do something fun this weekend, let me invite you, if you're in the Atlanta, Georgia area, to come to the Stone Mountain Ham Fest. It's actually in Lawrenceville, Georgia. But Stone Mountain is also then the American Radio Relay League State Convention for Georgia. And Bruce and I are both going to be driving over on Saturday, and Dave Ivey and his wife Vicki, who co-teach the general and extra class with us, they'll be coming over as well. So if you'd like to get together, say hi in person, we'll be at the Stone Mountain Ham Fest, just walking around. We're not going to have a table. We're not selling anything. We're just going to be there. But look for us. Come on over and say hey, and we'd love to shake your hand and say hello. All right, so because of the hurricane and because of everything, we had to change our schedule just a little bit. So this is where we stand right now. Today, being the 30th, we're going to be talking about licensing regulations. Next week, we'll be talking about operating regulations. And then the 13th of November, we'll be talking about Chapter 9, the last chapter, safety. Plus, we'll do PT. No, not physical training. We'll take a practice test together as a group. And then the following week, entirely optional, but we'll take 2 more practice tests together on the 20th. It's entirely optional if you want to participate in that. But what I want you to do now, you're almost done. You've almost got your license. You're almost ready to take that test. If you haven't already, find a test session that's coming up. Check out your local ham club, or you can use hamstudy.org/sessions. Here's some more links. ARRL has their Find a Club URL, or Find an Amateur Radio License Exam. If you're coming to the Stone Mountain Ham Fest, I'm sure they're going to have licensing exams there. You could take your test then. And this is the one, if you want to take your test online, which is something I don't generally recommend for your technician test. You've got enough stress going on, but you can go here to hamstudy.org/sessions and find both in-person sessions, put your zip code in and you'll find a local one, or take the test online. It is entirely possible. Now, before you go to any of these sessions, however, you need to obtain something from the federal government, a federal registry number from the FCC. An FRN number. There's a really long URL at the bottom of this, and I'll be giving you the handout in the Dropbox link. You'll have it tomorrow. But you can also just Google getting an FCC FRN number. It is required before you take your test now. It used to be you could use your Social Security number, but they invalidated that. So now you have to get the FRN number first before you take your technician test. It's not hard. It's you just do it online, and then you're ready to go and bring that number with you to the test session. Practice tests. I mentioned we're going to take some together here in class, but you can get started taking practice tests now. And this is the website that I recommend. It's the American Radio Relay League's review site. The URL there is at the bottom, and you can sign in for a free account and go ahead and review test questions from past chapters, or actually start taking 35-question practice tests. They're the actual questions and the actual answers that you will see on your test. Just remember that the answers are going to be in different orders. So don't memorize A, B, C, or D. That won't help you a bit. But know what the right answer is, and you will, because we've gotten you ready. So get ready, because we're going to get you your ham radio license and get you on the air as soon as possible. And then once you get your license, become active in a local ham club. The members there can help you get on the air. They're your greatest resource. So tonight is Chapter 7, Licensing Regulations. And I'll tell you, this is a short chapter. So, and it's not a math-oriented chapter or anything like that. So we are actually going to get out early tonight because you've been so good, and I'm so proud of you. So let's get started. 4 sections tonight. Here's section 7.1, Licensing Terms. So amateur radio, well, it's an official class of service as designated by the FCC. It's not business band radio. It's non-commercial voluntary communications for persons who are interested in radio technique solely with a personal aim and without, I love this word, pecuniary interest. It comes from the 1934 Communications Act. Pecuniary means monetary. You can't make money from operating your ham radio station. It's a personal thing. But it is an official part of the FCC regulations. Part 97, we'll look at that here in a sec. One thing about the CQ Worldwide contest this weekend, there were stations on from all around the world, and that's the thing that amateur radio enhances international goodwill. Now, we've been talking about technology and Ohm's law and things like that, and so you think that this is science and technology. No, we are artistes, because we contribute to the advancement of the radio art. It's in the regulations. It's true. So being a ham radio operator contributes to the radio art. So Part 97, those are the FCC regulations for amateur radio. It sets the frequency bands and it sets the privileges of the different license classes. In the United States, we have 3 classes of license: technician, general, and amateur extra. And we get additional frequencies that we can operate on as we advance up the ladder. So it's called incentive licensing, and our incentive is to get additional frequencies. Now, that's not true in other countries. In England, for example, you get all the frequencies right away, but it's power levels. You're at lower power levels, and then as you advance, you get higher power capabilities. So the FCC sets the privileges of the different license classes and the frequency bands. They also issue amateur radio licenses after you pass your test. And that includes then for special event stations, we'll talk more about those, and vanity call signs. Can I choose my own call sign? Yes, within reason. We'll show you more about that. The FCC coordinates the United States interests with the International Telecommunications Union, which is the worldwide body for civilian telecommunications. And here's an interesting thing. The FCC may inspect an amateur station at any time. That's one of the things that you sign up for when you get your license. It's not going to happen. The FCC is overburdened with so much other stuff going on right now, but technically they have the right to knock on your door and say, please, may we inspect your station to see if you are using good engineering and good amateur practice? They can do that. And how many licenses can a person have? Only one license per person. And if you suffer from insomnia, here's a URL from the ARRL that has the latest Part 97 amateur radio regulations. You can read them in detail, but as a former U.S. federal government worker, I can tell you it's written in governmentese, so it is likely to put you to sleep. One thing you do want to know about, though, is, and this is a change, not too long ago, they said that, oh, you got to keep your mailing address up to date. Now you've got to keep your mailing address up to date and your email address up to date with the FCC. If they can't contact you by email, that can lead to the revocation of your operator and station license. And remember, when you get a license in the United States, it's two licenses in one. Station license gives you the ability to build a station, and an operator license gives you the ability to operate. But make sure your email address is updated with them. And here's some more facts about amateur licenses. The term of a license is 10 years. And you will have to pay, I think it's a $35 fee to the FCC, plus whatever the fee the volunteer examiners charge, $10, $15. But that $35 to the FCC is good for 10 years. Now, what happens if you go for 10 years and you forget to renew your license? You can renew your license during a grace period. That grace period lasts for 2 years after the 10, so that if I haven't renewed, you can go online to the FCC Universal Licensing System website and do the renewal. You can do it online. You don't have to pay anybody to do it for you. You cannot operate until you get your license back, but that's the grace period, 2 years. What that means is you don't have to test again. You don't have to take the test again during that grace period. And it's now come that the Universal Licensing System database is king. When your call sign and when your name and whatnot appears in the database, that's when you are licensed. Back when I first got my novice license in 1969, we got our licenses in the mail. And so I took the test from a ham in Saginaw, Michigan, and then I had to wait 6 weeks. And I had no idea, did I pass? Did I not pass? What? And so finally, an official letter arrived in the mail. Open it up, my call sign, Whiskey November 8 Golf Alpha Juliet, WN8GAJ. I was a ham. So don't do that anymore. We don't do that anymore. The FCC does not mail out licenses. What you do is the Universal Licensing System database. They may send you an email that says, hey, you're licensed and everything. But you actually go to the database and print a PDF version, an official copy of your license from the database, so the ULS system. We talked about the federal registry number. That's another one of those points that you have to have even before you test now. And should you and some other friends of yours want to sign up for a ham radio club station, just remember the rules are that a club must contain a minimum of 4 or more members before the FCC will even entertain the fact that you can get a club call sign, for example. All right. And here's a look at the Universal Licensing System website. It's all done online in a browser. The URL is down there below. And the ULS is your friend because it is where the FCC will keep all of your information. This is where, though, you would update your mailing address or update your email address if you change it. You can just log into your account, make the changes, save it, boom, you're done. It's easy. Now, the FCC has punitive powers if you were to misbehave on the airwaves. The FCC is the radio sheriff, but really we are a kind of voluntary group of folks now where there are official observers, a part of the ARRL, that actually listen on the bands and will actually probably contact you and say, hey, did you know you were transmitting out of band inadvertently during the CQ Worldwide Single Sideband Contest, Gary? It happened to me. I followed a spot and realized, uh-oh, I'm not supposed to be transmitting single sideband here, and I quit immediately, but it happens. But the FCC used to issue notices and violations. They don't hardly do that anymore. However, if you do something really egregious, then yes, they can put you in jail or federal prison, or you can have a fine up to $10,000. They have those powers. So as I mentioned, there are 3 classes of license in the United States today. Technician, which is what we're studying for, the general class, which is the intermediate level, and then the top class is the amateur extra. And we provide training for all of those levels here on the YouTube channel, free. It used to be that you could get a novice license. Remember I said I had WN8GAJ, that was a novice license. You could get conditional licenses if you couldn't travel to a testing center. There was something called Tech Plus, and then there were advanced class amateur radio operators. You can't test for any of those licenses anymore. However, they still do exist because the FCC said 10 years renewable. So there are still novices out there that still have the ability to operate Morse code and the HF bands, but that's really all they can do unless they were to upgrade to technician and then on to general, et cetera. So just when you see the breakdown of licensees, you go, well, wait a minute, there's only 3. No, all of those still exist. We can only get technician general or extra right now. I said it was going to be a short night tonight. We're ready for questions. So let's see how we do. You can go ahead and unmute when you have an answer. So which of the following is part of the basis and purpose of the amateur radio service?
Charlie.
Charlie is absolutely correct. Because we are artistes, we are advancing the radio art along with the technical skills as well. So that's true. All right. So which agency regulates and enforces the rules for the amateur radio service?
C.
What did I hear?
C.
C,
The FCC.
Yeah, the FCC, Charlie. Yeah, phonetics work well here in answering the question, so that would be Charlie. Yeah, if you got that one wrong, I'm going home. Oh wait, I already am home, but okay. FCC. So how many operator primary station license grants may be held by any one person?
Alpha.
Yeah, alpha, one. You only get one per person. And what proves that the FCC has issued an operator or primary license grant? When are you a ham?
Charlie.
Yeah, remember I said the ULS database is king. When the license appears in the database, then you are licensed. So for which license classes are new licenses currently available from the FCC?
Delta.
Delta is correct. 3 classes: technician, general, and amateur extra. And what may happen if the FCC is unable to reach you by email?
Charlie.
Not Charlie.
Bravo.
Bravo. It's revocation, but it's revocation of your station license or your operator license. They can revoke it if they can't reach you. So which of the following can result in revocation of the station license or suspension of the operator license? It's the same question, just asked in a different way.
Bravo.
Yeah, Bravo. Again, the email address. Failure to provide or maintain a correct email address. You won't get both of those questions on your test, but you may get one or the other. So what is the normal term for an FCC-issued amateur radio license? How long does it last?
Charlie.
Charlie, 10 years. And what is the grace period for renewal of an amateur radio license?
Alpha.
Alpha.
Yep, 2 years. You've got 2 years. After the 2 years, you can still get relicensed. You just have to take the test again.
Ooh.
So how soon after passing the exam for your first amateur radio license may you transmit on the bands? What is king?
Charlie.
The database is king. As soon as you appear in the database and your call sign is listed there, then away you go. So if your license has expired, but it's still within the allowable grace period, may you continue to transmit on the amateur radio bands?
Delta.
Yeah, no. You must wait until you're back in the database, until you have a valid license in the database. And when must the station and its records be available for FCC inspection, theoretically?
Bravo.
Yeah, at any time upon request by an FCC representative. And they have badges and they have federal ID cards. So which of the following...
Middle of the night on a Tuesday.
Say that again?
Middle of the night on a Tuesday.
That used to be the worry, but nah, I don't think they're going to do that. So which of the following is a requirement for the issuance of a club station license grant?
Bravo.
Yeah, the club must have at least 4 members. Oops, I pushed that really quick. All right, so section 7.2, bans and privileges. So as I mentioned, the FCC has enforcement powers, but nowadays, amateurs tend to police themselves. And one of the ways we do that are to adhere to the band plans that we talked about that are available at the American Radio Relay League's website. They're gentlemen's agreements or gentle ladies' agreements, how the bands are going to be used, where certain types of signals are going to appear on the various bands. And we also use frequency coordinators. These are people who administer radio repeating systems on VHF and UHF and in the region. And frequency coordinators are selected by owners of repeaters in that area. So here in the upstate of South Carolina, our frequency coordinator is the Southeast Repeater Association, SARA, and members of SARA are selected from or by repeater operators. So again, this is a way that we self-police and self-coordinate. And the whole purpose of coordinating frequencies for radio repeaters is to prevent interference to other repeaters or to other services. They want to make sure if you want to get a new repeater on the air, great. They're happy for you to do that. Just if you get a coordinated pair of frequencies for your input and output, then you can be assured that you're probably not going to be interfering with anybody else, or they're going to be interfering with your repeater. So it's a good thing to have that done. Now, some of the frequency bands, like the 70 centimeter band, 440 megahertz UHF, are shared frequency bands, and hams may have a secondary allocation. We do in the 70 centimeter band. And so therefore, we have to protect the primary users, especially if those primary users are involved in radio location or navigation. We don't want planes to go off course because we're transmitting on a band. So just keep that in mind, that if we're in a shared band and you hear some other communications going on, realize that, oh, I'm a secondary user. I'm not the primary user. So I'm going to QSY. I'm going to turn the big knob on my radio to a different frequency so I don't interfere with them. All right, I mentioned this earlier on when I was talking about the CQ Worldwide Contest. Can technicians use single sideband voice on HF? And the answer is yes, on the 10-meter band, which was wide open in the contest, on 28.3 to 28.5 megahertz is where technicians can, on the HF bands, transmit voice signals. On any of the lower frequency bands, techs are limited to certain frequency allocations and only Morse code. We'll talk about that as well. I want to reintroduce, I told you there's going to be no math tonight. Well, there's a little math, only if you want to use it. You might remember we talked about this, that the difference between the frequency and the wavelength is 300 divided by the frequency in megahertz, or it's 300 divided by the wavelength in meters. You can find one or the other. I only bring this up that there are some test questions that this little clue might help you in getting the right answer. So that's why I bring it back up here. All right, technician class restrictions. Here are the sub-bands on 80 meters, 40 meters, and 15 meters, just small segments. You can see it on the color chart where you're able to transmit and receive Morse code. So on those HF bands, technician class operators can only transmit Morse code. On the 10-meter subband, you have the possibility of transmitting Morse code, radio teletype, data, and voice. So those are the HF band and mode restrictions. Now above 50 megahertz, generally you have full privileges, but just be aware that no matter what class of license you have, there are some mode restrictions on 6 meters, 2 meters, and 1.5 meters. Both 6 and 2 meters have small Morse code only or CW only subbands at the very low end of the band. So in that frequency range, you're only allowed to transmit and receive Morse code. And then the 220 megahertz, the 1.25 meter band, they have between 219 and 220 megahertz, a spectrum there that you can only transmit data, which is used for fixed message forwarding. Otherwise, there are no mode restrictions whatsoever, but just know that for the bottom of the 6 and 2 meter bands, Morse code only, and for the bottom of the 1.25 meter band, data signals only. And if you're going to operate Morse code on the HF bands or single sideband on 10 meters, as a technician class operator, you're limited to a maximum output power of 200 watts. These are old incandescent bulbs that used to really consume 100 watts. So that's the analogy. 200 watts is the limitation for technician class operators on the HF bands. Now, when you upgrade to general, then you'll have full legal limit 1500 watts. But right now, with your technician class license, above 50 megahertz and above, you can transmit full legal power, 1,500 watts peak envelope power. So last week we talked about communicating with other hams, and we talked about calling CQ and trying to talk to somebody. Remember, when you're picking a frequency to call CQ, first, number one, listen. See if anybody is on that frequency, okay? Ask, is the frequency in use? Or if you're sending Morse code, you send QRL question mark and your call sign, so you can find out if the frequency is in use. And use the ARRL color chart that we have available to make sure that you're in your assigned frequency and mode areas. Like I say, I followed an errant spot from the internet that said a rare station was on this frequency, and I realized only after I'd called him once, oh, wait a minute, I'm out of band. That didn't work. Out of band, like if you saw this frequency readout on your radio, 27.3848, no, that's CB. That's a CB frequency. That's not the 10 meter band. All right. We are at the top of the 11-year sunspot cycle right now, and that means that the high frequency bands like 10 meters, 6 meters, 15 meters, gangbusters. Great propagation for low power. Well, how do you know? How do you know if a band is open? Well, you can use spotting websites, and here's one that I like for newcomers, DX Heat. And DX Heat has this panel on the side which actually shows you which bands are open and shows you the solar flux indexes, and these are spots. These are spots of stations that are on the air and then their frequencies, so you can tune over and listen to them. And they have them for HF and for VHF and UHF, etc. So that's one way. You can use a spotting website to determine if the bands are open. Another thing, if you know Morse code or want to learn Morse code, there are beacon stations that have been set up around the world by the Northern California DX Foundation. And these beacons might be as far away as in Tokyo or Frankfurt or lots of different spots. And they transmit Morse code signals based on a clock and on a particular frequency. So you just listen on one frequency and you know the clock face, you know who's supposed to be transmitting at that time, and if you see if you can hear them. And that's one way. Beacon stations like this, they're simple transmitters, 100-watt transmitters with simple antennas. The whole purpose is for checking propagation and maybe for some other experimental purposes if they're sending telemetry or some other information. So that's what a beacon station is all about. And then you can also check websites. One is WhisperNet, which can show you where propagation is open on particular frequencies. And another website that I like to use that I didn't list here is PSK Reporter. That will actually also show you where stations are connecting using digital modes and Morse code. It tells you where propagation is open to. All right, more questions. So what is the FCC Part 97 definition of a beacon?
Delta.
Delta is correct. It's an amateur station transmitting communications for the purposes of observing propagation and or related experimental activities. So which of the following entities recommends transmit-receive channels and other parameters for auxiliary and repeater stations?
Bravo.
Yeah, these are the frequency coordinators. They're volunteers. They're not paid. Recognized by local amateurs. Here in the upstate, it's the SERA, S-E-R-A, the Eastern Repeater Association. So who selects frequency coordinators?
Charlie?
Yes, it's the owners or the operators of repeaters in that region. So it's a gentleman's agreement. They work together, they cooperate. So which of the following frequency ranges are available for phone operation, single sideband, by technician licensees?
Charlie.
Charlie, this is that small segment on 10 meters, the 200 kilohertz wide segment where you can operate single sideband voice. It was packed full of DX signals this last weekend. So which frequency is in the 6 meter amateur band? And as you're studying, you can look at the color chart. You can also use our trick 300 divided by 6. Gets you close.
Bravo. Or Alpha.
Charlie?
No, it's Bravo.
Oh.
It's tricky. When I said close, I said, oh, I'm going to mislead somebody. Now, it's 6 meter band starts at 50 megahertz. So, yeah, 52.525 would be in the 6 meter amateur band. Notice the bottom two, 28.5 and 22.15, those are way off. Those are distractors. So, it's between A and B. And just know that A is outside of the 6 meter band, but B is in fact inside. All right, here's another one of these. Which amateur band includes 146.52 megahertz?
Delta.
Delta.
It isn't, in fact, Delta. 146.52 is the national calling frequency for FM in the United States. That's, if you want to talk to somebody with your HT simplex, that's probably the place to start. And you could do 300 divided by 146.52 and get you close to 2 meters. All right, how may amateurs use the 219 to 220 megahertz segment of the 1.25 meter band? This is one of those limitations.
Delta.
Yeah, for this, it's fixed digital message forwarding only in that 1 megahertz segment. So on which HF bands does a technician class operator have phone privileges?
Charlie.
Not Charlie. Voice
Bravo.
privileges. Not Alpha.
Bravo.
It is Bravo, yeah. That small segment we talked about, the 28.3 to 28.5, that's where you could operate single sideband voice phone. That's the only place that technician class operators have to do this on HF. Now on VHF and
Very-
above, but you can't. Yes?
What does phone mean?
So phone comes as an abbreviation of radio telephone, which was, you know, the old communications way of talking about, you know, sending your voice by radio. So it's traditionally called phone. You could call it single sideband, but in this case, that's what they're using the traditional term.
Is that different than other types of voice communications?
No, any kind of voice communication you could call a phone communication. It comes from radio telephone.
Okay.
Okay, so which of the following VHF UHF band segments are limited to CW only?
alpha,
Yes, the very bottom of the 6-meter band and the very bottom of the 2-meter band, limited to Morse code. And how are U.S. amateurs restricted in segments of bands where the amateur radio service is secondary?
alpha,
Yes, you may hear other stations like in the 70-centimeter band, and you have to avoid them and avoid interfering with them is the primary thing. So, okay. What is the maximum peak envelope power output for technician class operators in their HF, high frequency band segments? How many light bulbs?
A, alpha.
Yep, 2 light bulbs, 200 watts. And except for some specific restrictions, what is the maximum peak envelope power output for technician class operators using frequencies above 30 megahertz? How many light bulbs?
delta,
Yeah, 1,500 watts. All right, we're rolling right along. There are 4 sections, and we're already up to section 3, international rules. I mentioned earlier on that the FCC coordinates civilian communications activities in the United States with their counterparts at the International Telecommunications Union. The ITU is part of the United Nations, but they're based in Geneva, Switzerland. And the ITU is the global entity that coordinates all of these activities. And the ITU has actually split the world into 3 different regions. ITU Region 1, since they're based in Geneva, they gave themselves the number 1. So Europe and Africa is Region 1. You follow the sun, and we're in Region 2, ITU Region 2. And then the Pacific and Asia is ITU Region 3. The reason this is done is there actually, a point is that there are different standards in the different regions, different frequency allocations because of historical things, so they can be different. Just know that also there are different ITU zones worldwide as well. So here in the eastern United States, we're in ITU Zone 8. And that's not used very often. It's not to be confused with CQ Magazine's zones. Here in the eastern United States, we're in CQ Zone 5, which was part of the exchange that I made for every contact in the CQ Worldwide contest. 595, I was giving the folks my CQ zone. So ITU regional differences. Frequency allocations may be different from one region to another. Band plans, the agreements as to where certain modes are going to be, may be different in the different regions. Some U.S. territories, like the Marianas Islands, Guam, they're outside Region 2. So they have some special characteristics if Americans are operating there, or U.S. licensees. Other radio services may share amateur frequencies in different regions. Like, for example, the 70-centimeter band here in North America is shared. To operate in a foreign country, it must be authorized by that country, either individually or through treaties. We'll talk some more about that. And in international waters on a U.S. flag vessel. Key point. U.S. licensed hams may operate, but the location's ITU region frequency allocations apply. We're going to talk more about this because there's some other things. Most definitely, the captain of the vessel or the pilot in charge must approve your operation of any radio equipment. And if you think you're going to go on a cruise ship and operate your ham station, think again. Very, very, very few cruise lines will allow it. There are ham radio cruises. That's the only exception, that they do allow limited operation of some stations. And what do hams talk about? Communications incidental to the purposes of the amateur radio service and remarks of a personal nature. That's what we do. We don't, advocate. We don't do business. We just, talk about our stations, talk about our antennas, talk about the output power, and maybe make remarks of a personal nature. Now, it is possible that some countries can ban amateur radio. They can say that, it's not allowed. Right now, there is only one country that I'm aware of that has not allowed amateur radio operations in a very long time. That's North Korea. Yemen was actually on the air not too long ago, and Yemen was one of those that was not allowed on the air. So, but North Korea has not been active for a very long time. I've got another story we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But if a country does not want amateur radio communications with their citizens, they will inform the ITU and say that it's prohibited with their country. It's not prohibited for us to talk to North Korea. They have not done this. They just have no ham radio operators in North Korea at the moment. All right, I mentioned U.S. flag vessel, and be careful because a lot of American ships might be registered in Liberia. There's registry things that go on there. So U.S. flag vessel, with the permission of the captain, then you can operate based on the terms of your license. So come back to me for just a second, Bruce, because one thing I love about this hobby is that some of its champions, some of the ham radio heroes are accessible. That people that you read about or hear about, or people that have done some really remarkable things in amateur radio, you can get a chance to meet, and you'll meet them at ham fests. And one of the biggest ham fests in the world is the one in Germany annually at Friedrichshafen, Germany. So I got a chance to go to Friedrichshafen a couple of times. And when I went there, there's a guy, one of my ham radio heroes. His name is Marty Lane. And Marty has been involved in DX entities around the world for years and years and years. He used to work for Nokia. And so as he was working with local governments and their posts and telecommunications administrations and whatnot, he would say, oh, by the way, since I'm going to be here working on this cell phone system for you, could I get a ham radio license? And he was licensed in Finland with a top class license. So generally they'd say, yeah, sure. So one of the last operations out of North Korea was done by Marty Lane. Here's his QSL card. If we go to the laptop, you can see, and there's Marty there on the right, his Finnish call OH2BH. So you can operate in a foreign country when the foreign country allows it. And you can go to that URL at the top at the American Radio Relay League to find out more about operating overseas. It's easy in Europe. There's an agreement called the CEPT that as long as you have the right paperwork, you're good to go. Other countries might be more elaborate. But Marty there on the right, he's just been involved in so many interesting ham radio activities. And so as my wife and I were flying out from Friedrichshafen Airport to go back up to Frankfurt, who do I run into in the airport but Marty Lane, one of my ham radio heroes. It's so cool. I love this hobby. All right, let's answer some more questions. So what types of international communications are FCC licensed amateur radio stations permitted to make?
Alpha.
Yes, what we talk about are communications incidental to the purposes of the amateur radio service and remarks of a personal character, or personal nature. And from which of the following locations may an FCC licensed amateur station transmit?
Delta.
It is Delta. If it's the vessel is U.S. registered, located in international waters, and with the captain's permission. So with which countries are FCC licensed amateur radio stations prohibited from exchanging communications?
Alpha.
Yeah, if the country has told the ITU we don't want that to happen, then we will receive a notice from the ARRL and the FCC that we are prohibited from communicating with that country. At the moment, as I say, there are no countries that were prohibited from communicating with. North Korea, however, just doesn't have any hams. All right, section 7.4, call signs. This should probably be of interest to you. So amateur call signs always have what we call a prefix and a suffix. And the prefix, well, let's take my call sign, for example. Let me put on my laser pointer here. So here's my call sign. The prefix is the W. Some people will say the prefix is W4, okay. But here, W, and the suffix is EEY. And then a region number is what the 4 is all about. Here in the southeastern United States, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, we are 4 land. And so we have call signs that have the number 4 in. If you're in this area, you too will get a call sign with the number 4. But if you're in a different location, it depends on your region. You'll get a different one. Shorter call signs are sought after for contesting primarily, and for other DX contacts and whatnot. Shorter gets through better than longer because it takes less time to say it. So, okay. New hams will be issued by the FCC, what we call 2x3 call signs. 2 letters and 3 letters on the suffix, separated by the region number. And this is the last call sign issued in the 4 region as of yesterday. KQ4WUW. So, okay, that's a mouthful. Gary, I want to change my call sign. Well, your first call sign will be issued by the FCC, and it's going to be a 2x3. But after that, then once you're in the database, then you can apply for a new call sign. They're called vanity call signs. You kind of pick your own, but the thing is, you have to have some limitations. If you have a technician class license, you're only able to pick from 2 groups of license. We'll talk about those. But in choosing an available call sign, the call sign has to be available. I love this website, AE7Q. And he's put together a database. He updates it daily of the FCC's output, and you can find out what call signs are available in your area. And short call signs, 1x2s, 2x1s, are not available in the 4 call sign area unless somebody dies, unfortunately. And those things are tracked. So people want those short call signs. So there's a 2-year period after the person dies that the call sign is only available to family members. And then after that 2 years, then the FCC can issue it to somebody else. There's a whole process, a lottery and whatnot, if multiple people apply. You can find all the details here at this website. But when you get your technician license, and if you don't like your 2x3 call sign, you can apply for another 2x3 call sign, or like my call, a 1x3. So you could have W4 something something, or K4 something something something, or N4 something something something. Those would be possible with your technician license. For club station vanity call signs, remember you have to have at least 4 members, and only the club trustee can actually file and apply for a new vanity call sign for a club. And when you start listening on the bands, you'll hear sometimes special event stations. One of the most popular is the Route 66 special event. And for these activities, stations are put on the air for a limited period of time, all along Route 66 in this case, and they have special one-by-one call signs, like W6A and W6B and W6C. And your goal might be to work all of them, to try to make a contact with every one of these special event stations using special one-by-one call signs. All right. More questions? So who may select a desired call sign under the vanity call sign rules?
Delta.
Yeah, once you get your license, any licensed amateur, you can immediately turn around and get a new license. And which of the following is a valid technician class call sign format?
Alpha.
Yeah, technicians are going to get 2x3 call signs. So here's the 2, KF, then the region number, then the 3. So this would be a valid technician class call sign. This would not be available. This would be available only to amateur extra class operators. This 2 would not be available. This is a short call sign. This would only be available to amateur extra class operators. As you advance, you have more choices and more availabilities to get your call sign from the FCC. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of Chapter 7. I'm so proud of you. We made it. Are there any, let me go ahead and remove my spotlight in the Zoom classroom so I can see everybody better. Are there any questions or comments before we go tonight?
I do, though it's highly unlikely, if you were to be on an American flagged ship, what kind of radio equipment or hardware are you going to be taking to broadcast and receive?
My guess would be some low-power battery-operated equipment. And a number of manufacturers, ICOM, Zygu, others make 10 to 20 watt radios that operate on batteries, and you'd probably put up a temporary end-fed wire antenna and try to operate using that. You cannot connect up to the ship's antennas. That's number one. And any installation that you would do would have to be approved by the ship's communications officer, because you don't want to be interfering with any of their activities. It's unlikely you're going to get permission, but that's the kind of thing that you probably would do. Now,
Okay, thank you.
on the ham radio cruises, oh, go ahead.
I could add a lot to that. I've got 35 years at sea. I've routinely transmitted high frequency through horizontal dipole and just stringing a line horizontally, and so you can do a lot of different things there. But you can reach several thousand just using the ocean as a ground plane. You can reach several thousand miles.
Yep,
That was
absolutely.
another part of my question. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments, questions? Super.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Last week you were talking again about getting that color chart.
Yes.
And could you repeat how we do that, please?
You can just email me. I don't have it up on the graphic, but W4EEY at ARRL.net. If you send me an email with your mailing address and say, Gary, I'd like one of those color charts, one of these, I would be happy to put you one of these in the mail back to you.
All right. Thank you, sir.
You betcha. Alrighty, you've done great. We got through in 1 hour tonight. I want to thank you, and let's come back next week. We'll talk about operating regulations. Until then, 73, y'all.
you.
See you next week.
Thanks, Gary.
Yeah, thank you.
Gary, thank you.
Thanks a bunch.